One reckless moment may have completely destroyed a racing career, not because of a bad finish, not because of a crash during competition, but because a driver allegedly lost control emotionally and drove directly into another car while crew members were still standing around it. Now fans are demanding lifetime bans. Some are even calling for legal action. And suddenly, a small dirt racing incident has turned into one of the most disturbing motorsports controversies of the year. The driver at the center of it all is Greg Martin. And after footage from I-75 Raceway exploded online, the backlash came immediately. The Best Plumber 604 Racing Series suspended Martin for a minimum of 2 years following what officials described as unacceptable conduct during a late model dirt race. Well, honestly, the suspension itself isn't what people are debating anymore. The real argument now is whether 2 years is anywhere close to enough, because when fans watched the replay, this stopped looking like normal racing aggression almost instantly. According to reports from the event, the situation began after Cory Hedgecock came to a stop on track with mechanical issues. His crew members reportedly surrounded the car while the race was still active. Then tensions escalated. There were claims that Hedgecock's father may have made contact with Martin during the chaos, but seconds later, everything crossed a line. Martin allegedly drove his car toward the stopped vehicle and slammed into it intentionally while people were still nearby. That's the part making this situation so serious. This wasn't just two race cars touching doors at speed. Crew members are standing around that vehicle, and video from the incident appears to show at least 2 people getting knocked down after the impact. That changes everything, and motorsports drivers accept risk every time they strap into a car. Crew members understand the danger too, but there's a massive difference between racing incidents and a situation where people outside the car suddenly become part of the danger zone. That's why the reaction has been so intense. Because once non-drivers are potentially put at risk, the conversation shifts away from competition and toward accountability. And strategically, the series almost had no choice but to come down hard. Grassroots racing organizations already fight uphill battles financially. They depend heavily on local sponsors, fan trust, and participation from drivers trying to build careers. An incident like this can damage all of that overnight. If officials appeared soft here, it would have created an even bigger credibility problem. So the 2-year suspension sends a clear message. The series is trying to protect its image before the situation spirals even further. But here's where things become complicated. A lot of fans believe this punishment still doesn't go far enough. Social media exploded with demands for a permanent ban across dirt racing altogether. Others went even further, arguing authorities should investigate whether criminal charges are possible because of how dangerous the incident appeared. Now, legally speaking, that becomes a very sensitive area. Motorsports is built around inherent risk. Accidents happen constantly. Aggressive driving happens constantly. But intentional contact involving people outside the vehicle introduces an entirely different level of scrutiny. And that's why some fans are openly questioning whether this stays a racing matter or becomes something bigger. The optics are terrible. That's the reality, especially because Martin wasn't some unknown veteran with nothing left to lose. He was reportedly viewed as a Rookie of the Year contender earlier this season, a driver with momentum. A driver building a reputation. Now, instead of discussing potential success, the entire racing world is talking about discipline and rage control. That's a brutal shift. And from a career standpoint, this may follow him much longer than 2 years, because racing communities are smaller than people realize. Promoters talk, teams talk, sponsors absolutely talk. Even if Martin eventually becomes eligible again, organizations may hesitate to attach their name to someone connected to this type of controversy. That's the hidden damage nobody talks about with suspensions. Sometimes the official punishment is only the beginning. Now let's talk about the bigger issue inside motorsports culture. Short track racing has always carried emotional intensity. Tempers explode. Drivers settle scores physically at times. Fans almost expect some level of aggression because that raw emotion is part of grassroots racing's identity. But there's also an invisible line. Competitors are expected not to cross, and many people believe this incident blasted straight through that line. That's why reactions have been so emotional online, because this wasn't viewed as hard racing. It was viewed as unnecessary risk involving innocent people. And once fans see crew members potentially endangered, sympathy disappears fast. At the same time, there's another side to this story getting attention. Some fans believe Cory Hedgecock deserves compensation after already dealing with a disqualification earlier in the event. Young dirt racers often operate on tight budgets. Repair bills matter. every damaged car matters. And when incidents like this happen, smaller teams can get financially crushed. That frustration is adding fuel to backlash. Now, the biggest question moving forward is what happens next, legally and competitively. Best case scenario for Martin, the suspension holds, no lawsuits emerge, emotions cool off over time, and eventually he gets another opportunity somewhere in dirt racing after rebuilding trust slowly. That's the optimistic version. But the worst case outcome is much harsher. Civil lawsuits, permanent damage to his reputation, sponsors refusing involvement, and other racing organizations distancing themselves completely. Because once video spreads online, incidents like this don't disappear anymore. They become part of a driver's identity, whether fair or unfair. And honestly, that may be the toughest consequence of all. At the end of the day, this entire situation feels like a warning sign for modern motorsports. Emotion has always been part of racing, but the moment anger overrides judgment around unprotected people, the sport enters dangerous territory immediately. That's why this story has hit such a nerve across racing communities. Not because drivers wrecked, but because people watching genuinely felt someone could have been seriously hurt. And when fans start talking more about safety than competition, you know the sport has crossed into uncomfortable territory. So now the debate becomes unavoidable. Did the series hand out the right punishment, or should Greg Martin never race again after this incident? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and for more deep motorsports analysis and breaking racing stories, subscribe to SportsWire USA.